Cool. So hi everyone, this is Jing. So in the next session, I'll be talking about the ETL spec writing. So really, first of all, I want to, because yes, okay. So the first time I heard about ETL spec writing, my first reaction is really what that is. And then I was starting looking through it, and it's very, in general or in short, it's just a guide document. So it's very similar to a data dictionary of, what the data look like. But then an ETL spec for our case, for the OMOP conversion, is really a guide or a manual that will help the developer who actually will be writing the codes to know kind of how to get from the source data to the ETL, to the OMOP CDM tables. Basically, where do I get all of the fields I need for my CDM tables? And then the developer will be using this document as a guide that, after the data analysis, now we know what the source data look like and how we map them to all the CDM tables. So that is really, in a nutshell, what the ETL specification document is. So as we can see here, so the first step is obviously the document will be created by the data analyst using the source data analysis, which Muid talked about in the morning, and also kind of vocabulary mapping that Chen just talked about as well. So that will all kind of be taken into consideration, will be worked on for the ETL spec development stage. And then it's really the roadmap for the development team, because they need the guide of where do I get my condition start date field from, and then they will be looking at the ETL spec document for that. And also in the last part, which I think this may not be that, is another thing we want to talk about that may not be kind of that intuitive at the first, is the ETL spec not only will be used while the developer is converting the data, but also it will be used during the QA process. So because after everything is done, which we'll talk tomorrow, the QA is definitely a very, very important part that everyone will be asking questions like, now that you convert the data, how do I know the data is good enough? Did you, is anything like wrong, or do we miss anything? All that fun stuff will happen during QA. And when we have any issues that we found during QA, the first thing, or at least the first few things we want to check is whether or not we got the map correct. If the ETL specification is the correct roadmap for the CDM conversion. So that's really something I want to kind of emphasize here as well. So this ETL spec not only going to be used while developing, but also will be a reference and might also be kind of a working document while you're going through the QA to correct the ETL spec document if there's anything kind of a misunderstanding, or we ignore something that we should not be ignoring. So all of that will also be using along the way from development to the QA process. So next, how do you create an ETL specification? So the first kind of we talked about in the morning today is the most important thing, which is really to understand what the source data is, and that's kind of really speaking from working with different data owners, working with different data from different countries. Is really source data can really be very different. I think in the real world, or realistically, even if they're using the same EHR vendor, let's just say they're using the same kind of EHR system from the same company, there could be customizations, there even could be variations, even if they're within the same hospital system or they're using the same vendor. So definitely, I cannot emphasize enough for the importance of knowing the source data, whether using Rabbit and then, or even additional kind of analysis of the data would be super helpful when you write the ETL spec. And then second is really to work with the data owners, because a lot of times, as I mentioned, even if the EHR vendor, you have worked with the system already, you understand the whether it's FHIR or other kind of system, you already know, but it's always important to confirm your understanding of the data with the data owners, because they could be making a few tweaks here and there that you didn't realize, and that could lead to QA problems in the future while you are doing the data quality checks and all that. So always work with the data owner. And then the third part is while although the ETL spec will be kind of going through, it'll be like finished and then give to the developer to actually write codes to convert the whole process, but it may not necessarily be correct the first time, so it'll still be a working document along the way. And on your right here, you can see it's really kind of for the it's a very simple example of what the part of or the main part of the ETL spec look like. It's really kind of on the first column is the destination, which is very familiar to everyone. It's a CDN fields with the CDN fields names and all that. And then the second column here is the source field. That means where do we get, like, let's for example, where do we get gender from? That will be from this. I'm not gonna read it, but that's gonna be the source field that it's coming from. And the rule is when it's one, it means I think this is woman, but I can get it wrong. I always kind of flip, but you know, one is after confirming with the data owner, let's just say one means woman and then two means man or male, whichever way they have it. And then the 8507, that's a concept ID, standard concept ID OMOP has. So basically this rule means that we get the gender information from this Benny sex identity code field from the source data. And when this value is 1, then we put 8507 for the gender concept ID. When it's 2, we put in 8532 for it. So that's a very high level or very easy, simple case of how do we kind of create a ETL specification so that it's a roadmap between the source field and the destination field. All right, so next slide. So here, as we can see, so the tables in the ETL specification. So this is really just the overall ETL table that you probably have seen it for too many times, and then and then as we can see, very like we have this do not enter here. That means we are not gonna be writing ETL specs for those tables. So which includes the standardized derived elements. So those we got asked the questions a lot as well. So what are the derived tables? So basically, once you develop all of the clinical tables, let's say condition occurrence table. So you will OMOP or OHDSI already provided you the information, provide you the code, the SQL queries that you can query, you can run on the condition occurrence table, and then you will get condition error table automatically. So that we do not need any specification to get those derived tables. And also the standards, the metadata is just metadata, so you don't really need a spec for that. And then for the standardized vocabularies, which we literally just discussed about all that, can be, and we just demoed how to download those from Athena. So all of the things here, you don't need to worry about it. You just download it from the Athena website, will be all good. And then that means all of the ETL specification we will be working on, or we are gonna be talking about in the later kind of 1 hour or 2, is really focusing on the clinical data. So those are the ones that we need to analyze the source data to understand how do we map them to the CDM tables and then write it up. So that's really the blue tables are the ones that we're going to be focusing on. And then here comes the next question. So we have like, I don't know, like 20 or 15 something tables here. So where do I start? And this question, this slide will kind of show you a recommended order of the tables, and of course it's not mandatory, it's not like the only way to go. Obviously based on different situations you can change the order a bit, but this is really kind of the best practices we have done before that we saw would be kind of a logical or a simple way to do that. It would be actually from the dimension tables. So the dimension tables will give you a basically the key, the unique keys to link everything. So you need to have the person ID first, or the person first, whether it's a EHR or medical claim. So normally they have kind of corresponding dimension tables as well. So that's basically where we start, is the person table, provider table, care site, and location. So those are the ones that we call them dimension tables. And then for person, and the other reason why we want to do those dimension tables first is also because, like, for example, person, there could be person or the people or the patients in our data that they did not meet the CDM criteria. Let's just say that person is missing the birth year, but that person does have, like, 10 records of either condition occurrence or drug occurrence or all that. But then due to CDM rules, so year of birth is a mandatory required field. By not having that information, that person is not going to be in that person's, all of his or her records should not be in the CDM, because when we don't have a person's birth year, that basically, like, we cannot really deduct or study anything out of that patient. Or the information we have, the clinical events we have on that person is not really going to be useful for all of the studies we need. So therefore, by doing the person first, we will rule out those patients, and then we just won't worry about their clinical events and all that. So that's another reason why we want to start with dimension tables first, and then we will go to the visit related tables so that we know kind of whether the visit is outpatient, inpatient, ER, or just a prescription. All that will be the visit table. And then it comes to the majority of the tables, as you can see here, are the main part, or the parts that's gonna we are going to spend most of our time on during a conversion, all of the event tables. And a lot of times what we do back then is, as you can see, for dimension and visit table, it's still not that much of a work. So we will first start with those two. And then for the event tables, most of the time people will divide and conquer. Let's say I'll do like condition and procedure, and then we'll have, like we will do the ETL spec for the other, or, so in that case, we can still be kind of in parallel. We can still be developing the ETL together for all of the event tables. The last but not least is the health economic tables, which includes the payer plan period, and most importantly, for all of the HEOR kind of traditional studies, we want to look at the cost information. So that actually is a bit, I want to say this here, that cost table is very different structure versus all of the other CDM tables. So I think that's another reason it's super different, and how you get it, it's a bit different from all the events tables as well. So we normally do that last. I want to pause now if any questions.
I want to just clarify one thing. In this particular example, the sequence shows the visit tables first, but I can tell you that doesn't always happen. Why? Because the visit table is typically derived, especially in things like EHR data assets or clinical environment type of data assets, because you really have to figure out the visit based on potentially all of the different records that exist for that patient for that day, right? So if it was you in the hospital and you had an admission record, then yes, that's great, that's easy to find, right? But not all data assets are like that. So it really depends on, the visit table really depends on when and how much information you have about a visit. So I want to make sure everybody understands that this is the recommendation, but this recommendation is assuming that you have visit related information already, okay? And I can tell you a lot of people don't have that. So that's why earlier I said visit is considered a derived table, versus here they're saying that visit is a table that you should work on first. Cool. I knew that might come up, so that's why I wanted to make sure I clarify that.
And I think, thank you so much, Mui. I think that really, Mui, please correct me if I miss speak on anything, but normally I think in the between is kind of the order can be different, but most, I would say 99% of the time, we will do the dimensional table first and we'll do the cost table last. And then it can be a bit, shifting around or something like that. But the beginning and the end is normally dimension tables and then cost tables.
For the ones that are here, but there are also the derived tables. So what we normally always do last are the error tables. What we don't show here are the error tables, and that's because this is ETL writing, right? There's a difference between ETL writing and actual the conversion work. Because in the ETL specs, as she showed earlier, we don't cover the error tables because the error tables, the code for the error tables already exist inside the GitHub repository. So the logic's already built in, so there is no ETL logic or ETL spec writing for it. But from a spec writing point of view, yes. And again, your spec writing will follow the same order as how you want to develop the tables. Are there only 16 tables? Well, I don't know if there's 16 here, but basically whatever table is in here, and plus the error tables. But again, that's for ETL. The error tables just are not inside the specification. And does that mean I have to populate all 16? No, it's whatever data you have, right? So earlier the gentleman mentioned that they don't have drugs, so then you wouldn't populate the drug exposure table. I have data assets that do not have lab data at all. So I may populate the measurement table because maybe I have vitals, but I don't have labs, right? I also have databases that don't have procedures, so then I won't populate the procedure table. It's whatever you have is what you populate. And I have lots of data that does not have payer plan period because it's not insurance related. So.
Yep. Cool. All right. Thank you, Mui. So that's really the sequence of a recommended way or a common one, but definitely knowing that in the middle it can be a little bit different based on the data differences. And then so we'll kind of just walk through a couple of examples of how do we actually write those write the ETL spec. So here, as you can see here, as I mentioned, the majority of the work, the dimension tables are actually easier to do at the first as well. I will say that easier compared with the clinical event tables. And after that, most of time, the ETL spec, the majority of the time will be spent on the clinical event tables. And as you can see, we have all of the events table listed here. And as we mentioned, so this is a comprehensive list of all different sorts of clinical events that may not they may not all exist in your data, which happens like very frequently. So that will definitely be what do we have and what do we populate in. So for example, as you can see here, so for the primary key, so we call them primary key, or it's just the linkage between all of the tables because we're a person-oriented CDM. So CDM is patient-oriented or person-oriented. So everything is going to be linked to a person ID who has what or who or prescribed of what. So everything is going to be back into a person ID, and everything is going to be back to a provider ID who provided all that clinical events, and then it will all be linked to a visit. Whether you had an outpatient visit that ended up with a drug prescription, or you have an inpatient visit that ended up with a kind of procedure or type of a device or whatever. So everything will have those primary keys. And then, as you can see here, so those are for all of the clinical events table, you will find them very similar actually once you do a condition or procedure, and then you'll realize, okay, so drug and device, they are in general very similar. So that's why we kind of have a common version of what the fields are like. So first of all, for the entity, that means, if we have a drug or a condition concept ID, so that is the standard concept ID for whatever the condition or drug is. So we do, like, for example, for Jing is taking levothyroxine, we're not going to put in levothyroxine in CDM table anywhere besides the concept table, because that's just too much words and it's going to take too many space and all that. So all of the CDM clinical tables, so everything is stored using concept IDs. So that's why kind of the beauty, and that's why we kind of spend so much time on understanding the vocabulary. How do we do mapping? So that's why kind of after mapping, we will then map to Jing's drug of levothyroxine into a drug concept ID of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we'll only be storing that. And then, so for that, we'll also have a source concept ID. So let's say if the levothyroxine is a Rx norm, then it will have something kind of similar to what we have here. It will just be another vocabulary that has another ID. But knowing anything with a source in it, that means it's not a standard version, and we pretty much will not use it unless we need to go back to the source data. So all of the OMOP studies, everything will be on the concept ID. Nothing will be on the source concept ID, or 99% of the times we're only using a concept ID. And then the last one, which I definitely want to spend some time kind of emphasize a bit on the entity type concept ID. So this is the most confusing one, I think, that, and also the most frequent or common issues, common mistakes we've seen before, because type can be very different things, but what we have for the type here is really not like, it's really where we're getting this information, the origin of the information. So is this condition from an EHR? Is this condition from a claim, or is this condition from, or is this drug from a pharmacy store, or this drug is from inpatient admission of prescription, or all that. So it's really describing the origin of the information, and most of the time it's actually the same for all of the records. So for example, if we're working on conversion of the same hospital, then all of the condition type concept ID will all be the same. It's the EHR, because we're getting the information from the EHR for all of the records. All of them belongs to the same hospital. So that's why, so that's kind of the confusing part, but this variable is actually the easiest to get once you kind of understand the meaning or the purpose of this variable. Cool, so that's a example. And then, so here we have the template of how to write a ETL spec. As we explained in a previous slides as well, we always have the destination field, that's just the CDM fields, and then the source fields will be whatever the information is from your source data, and the rules can be, a lot of times we see it's like, for example, the gender can be from 3 different tables. So we'll use like table A first if table A is populated. If A is not populated, then we use table B. And if B is not populated, we use table C. And when they're all populated, but they don't equal with each other, then you have a rule of thumb of we take A first, and then B, and then C. So it's really kind of when you have multiple sources for the same field, sometimes you do see the indiscrepancies between them, and then there you will have the apply rule column will give you kind of, that's the place where you put in like we trust A better, and then we trust B, and then we don't really trust C unless A and B is missing. So things like that will be used in the apply rule, and other comments you have will be in the comment. So that's really a standard template which we've been using for a long time, and I think this definitely works very well. And then, so here is a very simple example on the person table. So where we get gender, and we kind of talk about it really quick earlier. So besides the gender, like let's say like for the year of birth, because in person table, we separate year, month, and day of each person's birthday, basically. Instead of one field, we save them into 3 different fields. So that's why kind of for all of the, and most of the time, I think for data, they do save it as a birthday with all of the year, month, and date information. So that's why kind of you see all of the source field, it's the same for all of the 3 variables here, but basically we're just taking out of the year, month, and day from one field and then fill them in for the person table in CDM. So that's for the for a template example. And then, so here we can see, oh, so I kind of has talked about this a bit earlier, is when we have multiple source table, which happens like all the time as well, when we do have multiple sources, so we can write, you know, the apply rules of whichever way, after we analyze the data, whichever way will be the most reliable source of truth, you will put that as the priority. You take that first, and then you take the second if the first one is missing, and then if the first and the second is missing, you take the third. So something like that, that will be done during the data analysis stage, and then they will find out, you know, talking with the data owner or find out the missing rate, then they will have the order of, you know, where do I get the information from if I have multiple sources, which one do I prioritize the source. All right. Cool. So that's another example. We have multiple sources. So that's basically the theoretical or the general practices of all of the ETL spec writing part. Any questions before we go to Rabbit in the Hat tool to actually have the action started? Any question? All right, cool. So with that, I will go to the next part, which is really, now that we talk about ETL spec and what it is, how do we write it, and of course there is a tool that can help us with the ETL writing process. It's called Rabbit in the Hat. So as you can see here, the graph or the logo of the tool is really cute. It's a rabbit in a hat. And as you can see, we have white rabbit, and sorry, that was me posting the white rabbit candy earlier in the morning. And I really wish if we're in person doing the training, I will definitely for sure bring everyone white rabbit candies, just so that we're on the theme of white rabbit. And when we said white rabbit, it was like the first time I heard about it, like almost over 2 years ago, I was like, oh, that's a good name. That's a candy name. Nothing, you know, it's gonna be good when it's named after a candy. You know, that's good. And so that's really, but that's kind of another way for, hopefully y'all remember the name, which the first time I was like, oh, rabbit in a hat. Okay, that's interesting and easy name. And by the way, if any, I'm not sure if any, if Chan or Mui has mentioned, I don't think they have mentioned, but usagi is the Japanese version or Japanese saying of rabbit. So that's, I think that's a very cute thing too. Cool. Okay. Back to rabbit in the hat, not the naming. So of course, what rabbit in the hat is actually kind of together with white rabbit. So you pretty much, while you have already kind of tried it out, white rabbit, you probably have already seen rabbit in the hat in your box that is literally next to white rabbit. So it's, as you can see, there is a quick, or if you have already tried it, so it's very similar to Usagi or White Rabbit. They may, it's a very simple tool that may not be that fancy or that, you know, can run a 1 terabyte of data on it, but it definitely kind of served the purpose of helping us through the ETL writing. And also it can be downloaded here. So all that information very similar to White Rabbit, and they're pretty much always grouped together as one tool. So as you can see here, so I'll just go through the slide really quick, and then I'll actually do a live demo of how to use it. So it's very simple. You do need your scan report. So this is a sequential thing. You need to do the scan. You need to use the White Rabbit to scan the source data, the mimic data, and then you will have the scan report in Excel, which I believe all of you have used it, have it, and actually did the exercise on it. So please, we still need that report for rabbit in the hat, and then you do open the, because basically rabbit in the hat starts from when you have a scan report, when you kind of understand the source data, and then you start on the ETL spec writing. And then as you can see, you know, the source table, or, you know, all of the tables on the left, and on the right, it's always going to be CDM v 5.3. And as we mentioned, we are not moving forward with the CDM v6. We are sticking, or we're staying with the CDM v 5.3. And also, as you can see, so basically every time you click on the table, I'll show you what the table look like. It's the same information that you just saw in the scan report. And then the same thing with the CDM version of the tables. I'll just show up kind of what the table looks like, and very similar to the Excel information. So with that, I will stop sharing my deck, and I will start sharing kind of my box. So I'll do a live demo of the, sorry, okay, of the, oh, too many windows, and that's not helping. Okay. All right, let me start sharing. Can everyone see my screen? All right, cool. So if you, okay, I'll give everyone a second to get into Rabbit in the Hat. As you can see here, it's literally next to White Rabbit you just used. I wonder, and just working directly measure. So I see there is a question in the chat, map by diagram and showing, or can direct. So that's something I'm gonna be demoing. So let's see. Okay. So I will demo that part in the next minute or so.
So the question before that, though?
There's a question before that. Yes. So that actually happens. Oh. Okay. So that actually happens quite often as well. So we do have different versions of different mapping. So that's the rule you will put in to the apply rule column of ATL spec writing as well. So it's if there is a flag, we sometimes have the flag too. If it's ICD 10, you flag it. If ICD flag equals yes, and then you map it to ICD 10. And if ICD 11 is flagged equals yes, and then you use ICD 11 to do the mapping. So that's something, or the information you will need to put in as the ETL spec apply rule column, or the comments column, to explain to the developer which way they should go when you have different source vocabularies, which actually happens pretty often as well. Does that answer your question? All right, cool. So okay. All right, cool. Thank you. No problem. And then the next we will, so after you open Rabbit in the Hat, so the first thing you do is to File, Open Scan Report. And so what you had before was the mimic data. So you need to scan the whole thing. After you scan the whole thing, so you will have the mimic scan report, Excel, and then you open it. Okay, replace current data. So I was playing around earlier. So after that, you will see what I'm seeing here on the left. The orange tables are your source mimic data, and then the purple ones are the CDM version. And then, so next basically is what we need to do using it is, again, as we discussed earlier. So normally for the ETL spec writing, the first thing we start is the dimension table, and the last is the cost. So we'll start with the dimension table. So dimension table, as we kind of analyze the data, or we understood the data earlier. So the patient, so there is a patient CSV. A patient.csv file, that is the dimension table we're getting the people information or the patient information from. So that table, we are actually, so there's a little arrow here. So that's linking to the person table.
Yeah, pick the arrow.
My box is not the fastest. So we will link to that. And then if you click on the link, it will automatically show all of the fields underneath that you can see. Basically for the left, again, orange will have all of the fields that you can scan before, probably look very familiar to you, of what are the fields that's in the patient CSV file. And then on the right is just all of the fields in the person table.
To interrupt. So the question on the chat is there a scan document you can use? So earlier when I was demoing with you guys, when I did that, remember you guys create that scan report yourself on the White Rabbit? That's the scan report that she's asking you to open. So when you go to files and open, just use that when it says open scan report, use the file that you guys were using earlier. Remember earlier under the under your White Rabbit, the mimic data, there was that scan report. Pick that directory, and then you'll get the scan report.
Cool. So after so that's kind of the sequential thing between once you analyze your data, you understand the vocabulary, and now you're going to start linking your source data with CDM tables. So as you can see here, so for person ID, so here I because this is an auto-generated number for CDM table only, so it's actually not from anything from your previous from your source file. So you can write things like this will be auto-generated number, and that, you know, because we're not linking anything to it, it's just going to be itself. And then for the next one, so I normally just to go through the CDM because that's where you need information, and then you go to the orange source ones to find where you can get the information. And the next one is the gender concept. And as you can see here, so we have very clear, we have the gender information that's going to link to here. And because, you know, like if we click on that, we can see those are the information that we got initially, and then you probably have used it for the exercise as well. So that's the gender scan report information. We have M and F, that with the frequency and the total and all that. So here, what you are writing is will be, you know, because when we know that M equals to male, and then I should say if M, which is male. Let's have a recess. If M, then use gender concept ID equal 8507. 02. It's I'm not gonna remember. Mui or anyone. I think it's
have somebody look it up for you. Athena.
Yes, let's do. I should have remembered that because that's the. Let me do that.
Hey, somebody's quick. 8507. Look at that.
8507. Thank you. 8507, and then oh, what did I do? 8507, and if you know, if female, F stands for female, then use gender concept ID equals to. Thank you for the female too.
So Jessica, you didn't do that, but I just sent you the screenshot that shows you where the scan report is that we already pre-created, so you can use that for this exercise as well.
So that basically we just finished a mapping for a field. So now we'll have the gender concept ID, and then so everything is auto-saving, not auto-saving, but like once you finish everything, you can save or save as. So it's really like a working. It's no difference from any other, Microsoft Office or anything. So that's kind of when we're done with the gender one. Then we go to I'll just demo another one just to show the case. I won't do the whole thing. So as you can see here, so the year of birth, because we have here is, it has the the year of birth is integer, but then when let's then looking for what's in the source data, then we see this is date of birth, so that's the whole thing. We cannot really just take it directly. Then we need to kind of subtract the year out of it, so that we know. There is a weird number, but yes. So we'll be subtracting the number to it. So for year, so we can here link this date of birth to year of birth, but then we will be writing that subtract the year information. I'm misspelling information from DOB, which is a date. So, and I'm just writing, there's really no correct answer to write what's your comment, what's the rules and all that, but just so that it's specific, that people or the developer, they can understand. So that's all you need to do basically. And all that, I won't go through every part of it. And I'll say that, so the ones that are, months and day, it's just going to be the similar things. I won't kind of go through all of it. So any questions for the dimension table ETL writing, ETL spec writing in Rapid in the Hat?
There's a question that says, what is the difference between applied logic and comments? I don't know where applied logic is. Where were you seeing applied logic?
Applied logic is in the deck earlier, and again, it's just something. Yeah, so that's I wouldn't say there is a clear break between apply rule and comments either way, but you're just basically both of the fields is trying to say the same thing, is how do you either take it directly, how do you come from the source file to the source field?
Can you click on the line?
I have already clicked on the line, so this is when you click on the line.
Highlight that line again, please.
Oh.
So the line has to be highlighted.
Oh, yes.
So the logic is where you actually would put the logic. The comments are actually where you put any other additional comment. So technically your logic, your ETL logic goes into the logic section. So when it develops, when it finishes, it creates a little mapping table that shows you your source field, your target field, and then your logic, your business rule logic, and then you have comments. So for example, let me think of an example. So in her case, like when you put the male and female, you should put that into the logic column, right? Mm-hmm. But then if you wanna say, like, a comment would be that you want to put, like, what did we just say earlier? 8507. That equals no. So no. The apply logic would, the comment would be that 8507 means male, right? That would be a comment that you want to put in there if that's something you want. But the logic on top is actually where you actually put the actual logic. So the business rules, basically, for all of your ETL. Yeah, there you go. The logic for the year of birth, and then the comment would be you're extracting the year from the birth date. Perfect. That would be another way of using it. You don't always have to use comments. And again, with some, like Jing says, some people like to put it in the comments, some people like to put it in the logic, but there are two columns in there for that specific reason. Now, there was another thing in here that says, if your de-identified person ID can be accommodated in person table based on their constraints, you can load them in as is. Yes, so if your person ID is a numeric value, then you can load it in the person ID. If your person ID, which most person IDs are not numeric values, especially if they're encrypted like ours, then you can't load those. You can use those as a person in the source column, but not in the person ID. You'll have to generate your own. Then the next question I'm going to ask, because I ask my own people this question all the time. How do you make sure they're identical? Because like if I do a refresh, if I auto-generate those person IDs, then every single time my OMOP person ID will never match my source data person ID. So what I have is a separate table that has the person ID and the OMOP person ID against my native person ID, so that every single time I want to refresh, I reuse the same IDs. Okay, so that's something I get asked a lot as well that you guys might do. Okay, in this case, the subject ID technically, Jing, is the person ID. So technically, subject ID should map to person ID.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the subject ID is the person ID.
Mm-hmm.
But again, you see, in this case, their subject ID is a numeric number.
Yeah,
so you can say the person ID equals the subject ID. But if they happen to be an alphanumeric, you cannot say that. You just have to say, please auto-generate based on the subject ID in the from the source table, right? You'll do something like that.
Yep. All right. So that's kind of a quick kind of demo of how do you do a patient, a dimension table, specifically the person table. How do we link from patient? And one thing I want to mention here is that because as you can see here, there is another table. Oh, sorry, another field here that is date of death. So that's something kind of you will know for the dimension table. So if we go back, so not only this patient, so it does not necessarily be a one-to-one map, that patient map to person table in a CDM. So it also mapped to the death table because the death information is also in a patient CSV file. So you will have the cases that it can be, you know, one table from the source can map to like 5 different CDM tables, or, you know, or vice versa, same thing. So here we'll have my death. Where is my death table? So you can also link it to my box is being very slow. Okay, so you can see, you can still.
It just doesn't like you. You're doing a demo.
And of course it was okay, and it only got slower when you start demoing. So I'm not sure if it's because I'm sharing my screen and all that. Okay, so that's why kind of this are also linked to the death table, and then you can see double click. It's the same thing, and you see, you know, on the left is still the patient CSV file draws, and then you'll see kind of the date of death while then linked to the death date, and then based on the ETL rules or the comments, it's the same thing. You'll write it for the logic or the comments, kind of describe how do you convert or how do you change from the source patient sorry, not date of birth, not this one. Oh, this one. This I should cancel. How do I
delete? Highlight it and hit the delete button.
Yep. So that's kind of how you still link it to that. To same thing, kind of this, we're just linking another variable to another CDM table. So I want to make sure, you know, not only we can do one-to-one link, but you can, you know, even within the same table, you can link it to different CDM tables because you're asking or they're using different fields. So that's a quick demo of, just do a dimension table. And then the next one, I will do a quick similar demo with a clinical event, because as we talk about, it's mainly dimension tables, and the majority of the work is going to be how do we get to the clinical event tables. So here, as we already know that, so here we have the ICD diagnosis table. So that will be contributing to our condition occurrence table. Come on. Yes. And if you double click on the, I think I click on too many times. Okay, so as you can see here, then we have the role, the subject ID, which as we mentioned, if this case for our mimic data, it's the same as the person ID. Oh, sorry, it's all numeric, so we can use it as the person ID. So you will just link it to the person ID. And then there's really nothing like for logic or comment, so it's just a direct, so person ID will just equal, in our case, subject. So that will be it. And then for the next one, so this is a hospital admission ID, which will be later on be working on the visit table, and then we'll start linking on those. But then in general, what we're interested, or what are most important here is the ICD-9 code, which will really be linking to our condition concept ID. Because here is what we have for the whatever diagnosis that person have, and then the logic will be we use the code, map ICD-9 code from source data using the concept tables where vocabulary equals ICD-9 and concept code equals to, the ICD-9 code column here. So basically, we're asking the developer to go to the vocabulary tables that you can download from Athena, and then you go look up what is the mapping for a ICD-9 code into the OMUP standard concept IDs. So what kind of Chen has demoed earlier, Professor Yu has demoed earlier. So that's basically the logic we need to apply here in order to get the ICD diagnosis code, and then use the standard mapping of that code into the CDM table, because we're only using the standard concept IDs for all of the clinical events. Any questions? So this is kind of really the main part, or the very important part of the ETL stack, is that where do I get all of the important mappings? And in this case, because they have that ICD-9 code, so we can do this kind of systematically using the already mapped information from Athena.
So the question, one of the comments, or some of the questions here, can we get this mapping from Usagi? So in this case, yes, you can. But again, Usagi maps specific actual medical codes. Here is the logic for mapping it. So it's different. So what you would put here is what is the logic for mapping it. Doesn't matter what the code is, right? So you would say that what I would put here as the actual logic would be look at the concept. So in our group, what we create is a helper table, right? I don't have Agility right now, so I can't open it up. If Jiawei or Jing, you guys can open up Agility and go to one of the ETL tables, and I can show them what that looks like, but my Agility is down. But what we do is we create a helper table, and what we do is we bring all of the concept ancestor, concept hierarchy, and all that fun stuff, concept relationship, along with the source to concept mapping table that you saw Chan create, and create a helper table for that. And our logic actually from there in here is what we would say is what we say in here is to say the vocabulary ID equals ICD-9, and find the correct concept code using this ICD-9 code, and then use it and find the accurate maps to value in that table. That's all we would put in here. We won't actually put that, you know, this particular ICD-9 code equals this other ICD-9 code, because all that is actually populated inside that helper table that we already have created. So again, this is just the logic that the developer needs to write the ETL code for, not the actual content. Your Usagi is actually building the actual content of, you know, the mapping tables. Does that make sense? Okay, the next question on here is, I recall we were told that we can reuse ETL code from GitHub for populating EHRs, depending on your EHR database, okay? If you have Cerner, I don't know if they have the Cerner, I know Epic, there's an EHR working group, and there's a bunch of logic out there. So you would have to go check those guys and see if they have that stuff populated out there. If they do, you can use it, but I can tell you Epic, every Epic is installed differently, so good luck with that, okay? It really depends. You might want to watch that. What we have in the GitHub repositories already are the error tables. Those you can copy from there, but you can't always copy everything, okay? The next question is, what if the DoD is available in 2 tables? So if it's available in 2 tables, then you have to ask your business team which one takes precedence. And that's what you would write into the logic in this rabbit in a hat, right? In here to say, for this particular field, map to the DoD, and this takes precedence over the other field. That's what you would put in the logic. So we've had that before. I've had that where it can come from, my diagnosis codes can come from 2 different tables, and we put in the logic of the ETL to say which table takes precedence. But again, I don't determine that. My CDM experts don't determine that. Your data experts determine that, okay? Next question. If you have both ICD versions, you would write the logic here. Yes, you would write the logic here. So you would say if code, if code is ICD-9, or so in ICD-9, ICD-10, there's always an indicator somehow, right? So like in my databases, we have a type, ICD type. If it's 1, then it equals ICD-9. If it's 2, equals ICD-10. So I would say in the logic here, if type equals 1, then use the vocabulary of ICD-9 to look up the correct concept, right? And then I would say if type equals 2, use the vocabulary of ICD-10. Okay, that's what I would put the logic in here. Okay, or do you make the rules you only use one of the codes? No, I mean, again, it depends on the precedence. So I have in the United States, I have our ambulatory EMR, okay? That's a data asset name. It has SNOMED, ICD-9, ICD-10, and a description field. There's a logic in the precedence, okay? And again, I don't come up with these, my business team does. So what they tell me is, if it has a SNOMED code, then use SNOMED first, okay? And that's what I put in logic. So I put in logic to say there is a precedence in which code you use for this particular, for populating the condition table, okay? First code to pick is the SNOMED code. If a SNOMED code is present, then use that. Else, use ICD-10. Else, use ICD-9. Else, use description and look that up in our custom vocabulary mapping. If neither of them, set to 0, because I might not be able to map any of those, right? So then it's 0, okay? So I think you would need to pick one date preferential rather than record both. So yes, like I said, you need to pick one. So, but again, it depends on your data owner or the people who has your data. They know best which ones to pick, right? That's why we said when I started off, we said you needed a data expert, okay? That's who you need to ask. I don't come up with these rules. I just know how to map them properly to the CDM, but I don't come up with the rules. I see those, I ask those people those questions. Now, I know, Raza, you've been patiently with your hands up. Can I help? Can we help you?
Yes, can you going to one level up to the source? I want to ask when you see so many tables as an admission and.
Can you go up one level, please, Jing?
Yeah, I think it's a when we talking about in a ideal table as a raw data, we can see this, but do you have any experience all of this table you have here in only in a one source file, and you want to map only that source file to all of this table in a CDM version you had before? And you did it?
Yeah, our claims database is like this. Oh, I'm not going to leave. I'm like, oh, I'm not leaving. Our claims database is like this. Our claims database is 3 files. They're all flat files. It's 3 very, very long files.
Yeah,
and in one of them has all my procedures, my conditions, my everything, every transaction there is.
Yes, exactly like that. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
We have that, and you just have to show that it maps to every single one. So you're that one on the left, just the arrows goes to every single one of the ones on the right. But you then again you have to write the rules in for every single one of them.
Understood.
Yeah, so our claims databases are just like that. Like I said, 3. One's called the enroll file. One's just called, I can't remember what the second one is. The other one is the enroll to file or something like that. So like the enroll file has all my observation period, has all my payer provider stuff in it, versus the other one has all my cost information. Did they take was it a pharmacy, right? Prescription, was it, all of that is in one. So yeah, our claims database is like that.
The another thing you mentioned is there is a code, ETL code in a GitHub for OHDSI. Your team or the OHDSI team, they made it by C# programming. How is that? You think how they say it's 80% working usually, and 20% people should be write it the another. For writing by ETL by hand. It means it's not going to automatically map everything. Do you have any experience with that also?
Yeah, so what we have in the GitHub, so let me show you what's in GitHub. So what's in GitHub is the error constructors. So all of the error constructors are already available. So this would be the drug error, the dose error, the condition error tables. That's what's already been built. Okay, that's what's here. And you can, so we know all of us are on V5 now. So this is what you use, and you would create, there's the SQL for it, there's the SQL for it, there's the SQL, there's the SQL, right? So these are the derived tables that you would just grab from here. The rest of it is not anywhere. So what I was talking about earlier was that there's a working group called the EHR working group. And that working group basically works with both EPIC and Cerner databases. And they, if you go to their working group and their site, they may already have some of those rules already pre-built out. I don't know enough about their GitHub repository and where they are. You would have to go talk to them and see if they already have some of that code built in, because they may, okay? And if they do, great, then you guys can utilize that. But again, my one word of advice here, or my one word of caution here, is to make sure it does match what you have, because Epic, every Epic installation is very different. Even with Clarity, every single Clarity person has something different in there. Same thing with Cerner. There's multiple versions of Cerner, right? There's HealthFact 1.0, there's now HealthFact 2.0. So they're all different. So you have to see which one you have and whether or not the fields actually match the same thing as you before you go deciding to use what they have, right? So that's basically what I was saying earlier. So the error tables are already there, and then the EHR ones, you can join the EHR working group and ask them about that. I don't know enough about where their repository is, but yeah. I've heard rumors that they do have some stuff, but how much I don't know. And I know that they are looking at building like an ETL documentation repository where if people want to, they can publish their ETL specs out there, just the specs, not the code, but the specs, which means then you can go and if you have similar ones, you can go and look at those, right? But again, that's in OHDSI, it's all about voluntary work, right? So it's about how much the people want to disclose. Maybe for you guys, it's okay, but for like me, it's not okay. I'm a commercial entity. It's called IP. I can't go disclosing all my IP out there or else, you know, I get sued, not IQVIA. I get sued and I'd be fired, right? So some of this stuff can be available, some of this cannot be. So yeah. So hopefully that helps, answers a lot of the questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
Hey, that's why we're doing this, okay? This is free. I can disclose all kinds of information just as long as I don't go out down the IP route. See? So just don't ask me anything proprietary about my data. I'm good.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Did we answer all the questions out there? I'm trying to make sure I'm scrolling through all of these because there are a lot of great questions and these are great questions to ask. Okay, sorry, Jing, turning it back over to you. Oops, did she disappear on me?
No, I'm just unmuting myself. It should probably take a while. Cool. So, all right. So thank you so much, Mui. So can you guys see my screen again? I think so. Cool. All right. So that's kind of another. So while just going back to the awesome ICD again, so kind of that's a quick demo of how do we kind of do the clinical event tables, which are very similar idea, but just be minded, please noted that, just please noted that the vocabulary part, mapping part is really, really important and sometimes can get a bit more messier, you know, between different ICD versions or we have different sources, so you need to pick one, but just be minded that that's kind of always going to be happening, especially during a real conversion, but that's normal. All right, cool. So that's kind of my part of the demo. So now please just start with the dimension. So you have everything kind of you need from your boxes. So now we will move on to the exercise part of the ETL spec writing. So again, using kind of the structure, we'll start with the patient table and then the other dimension tables, and then move to, like Mo said, maybe move to the clinical events tables. So, and then you can find, and we'll share the data dictionary as well. And also, of course, you can always check on, you know, the scan report results.
So if you guys look at the deck, Jing, can you go back to the deck? I know, you know, we've been saying, hey, here are all the tables, but we're not giving you much information. So in the deck, page 64, which is where the exercises homework is, you will see we actually put the link to the data dictionary for Mimic in here. So my suggestion for you, and why we're giving you so much time left, because it's for the rest of the day as well as for your homework. You need to go over what you see in there, read through what the data dictionary has, and figure out how to map them to all the different fields, right? So we're going to let you guys have about 40 minutes right now to do the first table, and then we'll review that first table, and then from there, the rest really is your homework. Because again, we don't have to all sit here and watch everybody do the vocabulary or do their rabbit and hat mapping. But what we're going to want as a result of all this for tomorrow morning, part of our session is for folks to review and bring all their questions that they may have, like some of the ones that you guys just asked while you're trying to do the mapping. Because my guess is you're going to come up with some questions as you're doing the mapping, right? So we'll go over that. And then tomorrow, just as a preview, the next step we're going to go over with you is some of the common issues or common hiccups that we find when we're doing vocabulary, or I'm sorry, when we're doing CDM mapping. This is just based on a lot of our different experiences out there. And then we'll go into the actual design part of the development, and I'll show you some of the ways that we have certain things set up so you can see it. Now, I can't send you the code, but I'll just show you how things are kind of set up in our environment so you can see what some of the best practices are. Okay, there was a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to know, do you have, what is your suggestion about the esteem tables?
The which table, I'm sorry?
Esteem tables, esteems. When you are going to the CDM version 5.3.1, you can also add the esteem tables.
Extension tables, you mean?
No. Then in a maybe it's not in a real world when you are using rabbit in a hat.
Mm-hmm.
When you choose the version, also you can add esteem tables. You don't remember that?
No, can you show me?
Okay, let me run my rabbit in the hat again.
What do you think? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. See you tomorrow. Yeah.
I don't know.
Can you turn the cam off?
Yeah, I turned it off. I think this one is gonna record.
Yeah.
You.
So how you log out?
Should we just straight log out? And
Yeah. I just say thank you. See you tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay. So just leave.
While he is looking at that up, does anyone have any questions or about the homework or about the exercise in the homework?
So once we do the mapping, right, using the tool, do we need to get a feel for doing that export the specs and see it for how it's coming, or that's like tomorrow, that you'll cover that tomorrow?
Oh, yeah, the export is quite simple. So here you can say generate ETL document and hit the generate Word version, and it'll actually generate it for you. So like right now, if I want to generate it, I can. I'm going to call it mimic test example because I have some in here. I wouldn't hit the generate too many times because if you generate too many times, then it actually does crazy things. And my recommendation, and this is something we've learned ourselves, is that if you run it once, don't ever reuse Rabbit again. Just update it in the Word document itself. So where in the world did I put that? I don't remember where I put that. I think I put it in here. It's one of these. I think it's this one. So it generates this file for you. So what it shows, because the ones that I was playing with, right, I did this, right? So it shows me that the patient table maps to both the death and the person table. And then I did something with the condition occurrence, maybe. And here's the death table. So here I'm showing that I'm mapping the subject ID as well as the DOD, and these are the two fields. And here I didn't put any logic or any comment here, right? So that's what you guys are doing. What basically populate the device table, the drug table, the fact table. Somewhere down here, I did populate the person table. Yeah, see, I did do something. So here you can see there's the mapping there. I said that the subject populates the person ID as well as the person source value. So you'll see here person from person subject ID, subject ID equals person ID. Here, you'll see I populated the person source ID from the subject ID as well. Here's my comments here. So ethnicity, because it was a required field. If you guys remembered over here, when I'm looking at the this particular one, you'll notice that ethnicity and race ID are required. So even though there's nothing over here that I can map it to, but I put a comment here. And I didn't put one here, but I should put one there as well. And that's where the comment is coming from. So ethnicity concept ID should be set to 0 because I don't have any. It's the same thing with race. And that's the other cool thing about Rabbit. The Rabbit, it tells me which one's required. So which means I have to put some logic in there, right? And if there's nothing, you map it to 0. That's what you would do. So again, this was what it generates. You can basically, every single time, if you want to keep doing it, you just save it as a newer version, or you can overwrite it. My team, after a while, we don't do this anymore. Like I said, we've basically taken this table here and created our own version of it. So let me show you what one of ours looks like. I have an old, outdated version of it too. Let me see, where are my documents? Sorry, you can't see what I'm doing because I'm right now sorting through my files, which you can't see. And my machine decides it's going to take its little time. Where's my latest ETL specs? Here we go. Let's see. This is from a long time ago. Let's see if this one still applies. Yeah, let's see. So this is one of ours that we do. So again, we put version control in all of ours. So you can see here, tells you what we've done, what we've added, what we've did, blah, 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 so on and so on. So we organize it this way. We have some rules in here, what the source data is. So this is our claims database I was talking about earlier, 3 tables, that's it. Everything's in those 3 tables. We have some high-level source table information in here. We have some high-level rules that are being applied. And like here, we have some high-level information that we want people to understand about the table. So we have that information there. And then we have the same tables here, right? But again, we format it a little bit better. Sorry, let me turn off my paragraph mark. I'm used to having my paragraph mark on. So we see this is what the applied rules are. These are some of the comments that we have, the generic no match concept for unknown. So again, this is how we utilize it. Sometimes we can't fit everything in here. That's why you say see above rule for excluding patients, which is up here, just all this information up here. Okay, so we just do it this way. We don't actually use Rabbit, the white rabbit in a hat anymore. So again, we populate a bunch of information. We typically have table level instructions up here because there are instructions that we want to give and it's quite long and there's no way it's going to fit into one of these little boxes. So yeah, and then we also have examples like here's the care site logic. So click on it because there's a lot of logic in there, and sometimes for us it's easier to show you like actual records, how it actually works instead of just trying to explain something to you in a Word document. So we've enhanced what Rabbit in a Hat has. So again, that's what our ETL spec looks like. Like I said, our team doesn't utilize this anymore. But again, to get to where my team is, they started with this stuff because that's the best way. It's a more visual, helps them do everything and better understand logically in their head how the mapping works. So you can generate this yourself. Hopefully that was a long way of answering your question.
Yeah, thank you. Well, one last question is, let's say like somebody goes through all this exercise and then, from the source, right? Is there a way we can get a list of things that we have not mapped?
I don't believe so. I mean, you can only see it like this, but not any other way that I can think
Okay.
of. Yeah, you can see it like
or
this,
it
right?
would, or it would say like, you know, pretty much once you generate, you will have like stuff. If it's not going, let's say like to a couple of fields that are optional, we did not populate, it's going to leave it blank, right? So that
Correct.
will help us to review to see is there really any data available or not. That's all.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
Cool. Sorry, you can now
Thank you.
share your screen. Go ahead. Let me stop sharing. Raza, can you share your screen? Okay, you're in the CDM version. So what in here that you're looking, is it that you're looking for? This is the wiki site. Sorry, you're on mute if you're talking.
Okay, you can see my. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
The question is, what is your suggestion about the STEM table? Do you have any experience with that?
Which one of these is it? Are you talking about the clinical, the health data, the health economics, the standards, the metadata?
EHR.
Well, these are the OMOP data. These are the OMOP CDM tables, right? So I'm not too sure what esteem means. Sorry, I don't know what that is. I mean, we have other. I have a lot of experience with EHR data, but I've never heard of that one.
The STEM tables, you can add it from here. Add STEM table.
From where? Sorry, where?
Edit.
Okay, if I can interrupt, Raza, I think you are sharing. Okay. You can might be maximize your window to show the rabbit in a hat because we are seeing the CDM documentation now. Yeah.
This one. Add STEM table.
Yeah.
I have no idea what that is.
In a UK, some clinical use this for EHR, and for that reason, I'm asking you: do you have any experience with this STEM table or no?
I know I don't. So maybe others do, but I've never used this add STEM table to it. I've never. That's why I was trying to figure out what you were saying. No, I've never used that before. I mean, you can ask in the forums to see if anybody has any experience doing that. But yeah, not me, unless one of the other teachers have the same thing. I take that as no one else on this call has experience either. So sorry.
No, it's okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before we turn you guys loose, let you do some mapping and put you all, and you guys tell us how far you've gotten? Alrighty, I'm going to put you all on mute and give you guys some time to do the mapping, and we will check in.